Hi, I'm Zibby Owens, and you're listening to the award-winning podcast, Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. If you like this podcast, you will love my new anthology called Moms Don't Have Time to Have Kids. Check it out, and you'll hear from 49 authors about all sorts of things moms don't have time to do. All the authors have been on this podcast. Also, check out my TikTok with Zibby and Tracy, my other podcast, Sex Talk with Zibby and Tracy. Check out Moms Don't Have Time to Write on Medium. And of course, my new publishing company called Zibby Books. And now back to our daily author interview site and a quick hello from some of my kids. Hi.
Hi.
Hello. Enjoy the show. If you like this podcast, you will love my new anthology called Moms Don't Have Time to Have Kids. Here's a little snippet by one of the authors from the anthology.
My name is Jean Kwok, and I'm thrilled to have contributed to Moms Don't Have Time to Have Kids. My essay is called Mama, Am I Pretty? And what I really don't have time for is putting on makeup.
Savala Nolan is the author of Don't Let It Get You Down, essays on race, gender, and the body. Savala is executive director of the Felton E. Henderson Center for Social Justice at the University of California, Berkeley School of Law. She is the author of Don't Let It Get You Down, and she and her writing have been featured in the New York Times Book Review, Harper's Magazine, Time, NPR, and more. Welcome, Savala. Thank you so much for coming on Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books to talk about Don't Let It Get You Down, essays on race, gender, and the body.
Thank you, Zibby. I am totally excited to be here and can't wait to dig into the conversation with you.
Well, I just love the way you write. I love your point of view. I loved all these essays, how you link them together, the way you talk about your body, your identity, your feet. I mean, honestly, it was so good. And it's just amazing when you read great essays like this. And I love essays. So I don't know. I just got very, very excited about it. So
thank you. I mean, I love essays too. And these essays, hopefully they kind of walk the line between personal and political. They're very much obviously about me and my life, but they're also about things that we all deal with, like our bodies and race and class and gender. So I love that, as different as you and I are in some ways, I love that the book spoke to you. That's any writer's dream, is to have what they do matter, even to people who come from different places and different experiences.
Well, I mean, we all come from the same emotional place deep down. Like, that's what I think so much gets in the way. I'm not self-conscious about my feet, for instance, but I have my things, right? Like, we all have our things that we are embarrassed about our bodies. We have the things we don't like. We have, not feeling like we fit in and, not sure about things, and parts of our families that embarrass us. And I don't know, there's like so much that, the outside trappings are one tiny piece, I feel like, that often take up a lot of the air in the room, whereas the stuff that's really important gets left behind. But
yes, the stuff that's really important tends to be universal. I totally agree.
Yes. Okay, so let's back up for a second.
Okay.
When did you start writing this book? Why did you start writing this book? Did you always know it was going to be a book? Did you just start writing the essays? How did this whole thing come about? And how did you even start writing? Like, let's go there.
Well, I've been writing, forever. I'm one of those people that, was writing little stories when I was 8 years old on a computer after doing Mavis Beacon Teaches Typing, which is really going to date me for any of your listeners. So, there's a way in which I think I've been kind of working on using writing to understand how I fit into the world and understand how the different parts of the world fit into my own life since I was a really little kid. But this project came together, I guess, over the course of about 4 years. Essays are a really intuitive form for me. So I always understood that, if I published these pieces into a book, that it would take the form of kind of a memoir in essays. And, I think this book is really my attempt to understand or reconcile or make peace with the fact that I don't really belong anywhere in our culture in a seamless way. And, to kind of make use of the perspective that dislocation affords me. I mean, you've read the book, so I'm someone who embodies a lot of contradictions. Like, I am Black and white. My father was Black and Mexican, and my mother is white. I'm descended from enslaved people on my dad's side and slave holders on my mom's side. I happened to be raised in a place called Marin County, which, at the time that I was growing up there had the highest per capita income of any place in the country. But within Marin County are pockets of more middle class and blue collar and poor people. And I was more in that pocket. So I had access to some of the benefits of being in this really wealthy place, including private schools. But on my dad's side of the family, and when I was with him and his side of the family, I was experiencing, generational poverty that was really intractable and deep. And, I'm also someone who has been fat and thin over and over pretty much my whole life because I was put on my first diet when I was about 4 years old. And as anyone who's dieted knows, they don't tend to work long term. So I've gone on and off diets, I don't know, until I stopped dieting altogether about 5 years ago. So I think, being a woman and being someone who's so tethered to how I look in the culture, like having had kind of the quote unquote right kind of body and the wrong kind of body over the years has taught me things. So, not belonging neatly into these major categories that are so definitional in our lives gives me a unique perspective. And I wanted to write about that and share it with other people. And also, selfishly see if maybe I could kind of map out a place for myself at last, and this book is the result of that effort.
And do you feel like you did that? Like, do you feel like you came to some sort of conclusion, or that you feel more sort of, at home? Like, did it work for you?
I think in many ways it did work in the sense that, I'm way less interested now in trying to fit into a neat category than I was when I began writing this book, or than I've been for most of my life. I think we all desire kind of a seamless or easy belonging. That's a very natural desire to just feel that you fit neatly and easily and organically with a given group. So of course I still have that desire in a certain way, but I'm much happier and more at peace with just being someone who's in between and who's kind of, on the balcony and the dance floor at the same time in so many different ways. And I don't have the same level of interest in trying to get rid of that aspect of myself that I used to have. So in that way, yeah, I would say I definitely got something that I wanted from the process of writing these 12 essays.
So one thing that sort of not haunted me is the wrong word, that I can't stop thinking about is your relationship with your mom and how it's changed over time, and how you lauded the fact that she raised you with such, all these Black culture influences, right? Everything from singing at the church choir to just making sure that you had that, even though your dad had left, and how important that was to her that you understood that part of your own identity, which I thought was awesome. But that as you got older, you started feeling like more of a separation from her until you had this one scene of her as like this like frailer, older white woman, and like this difference. You could feel the sort of space between you as you wrote about it. Tell me a little bit about your relationship and like where it stands and where it stands today.
Well, I was, as you say, really lucky to be a mixed Black person who was, raised by a white person who understood that she was going to have to go out of her comfort zone, out of her way to connect me with Black culture, Black politics, Black aesthetics, Black history, once my dad left our family and no longer lived in the house, because, I would have absorbed those things just probably automatically if he had been in my house all the time. Again, my dad was Black. But since he wasn't, and I saw him, my mom was my primary caregiver. I saw my dad regularly, but there's no comparison to the person who's in the home raising you, right? So once my mom understood that I wasn't going to get those things, she just had the presence of thought to know that I, as a mixed Black person, was not going to be welcome in whiteness. And so it was incumbent upon her to make sure that I felt my connection to Blackness. And I'm incredibly thankful for that. I honestly can't imagine my life if she hadn't done that from a young age. But it's true, that as I became older, like any child goes through a process of individuating from their parents, and when I was really young, I didn't understand us to be so different racially. And as I began to just become more my own person and the world racialized me more, I became really aware of how, in a way, how deeply segregated our experiences of the world were going to be because we didn't share a racial identity. And there were times when that has been really sad, and times when it's made me angry, and times when we've been able to become closer by having, frank and loving and candid conversations about race, relying on the intimacy of our relationship to kind of get us through the more difficult moments. And my relationship with my mom is really, really good. I mean, at this point, it's really, really good, but it's been a complex road because her efforts were honest and purposeful and not contrived, they were genuine, but of course they were imperfect because she's not Black. So she couldn't translate everything perfectly to me. And one of the things I write about in the book is sort of the difficulty of having to contend with her racial blind spots and like her unprocessed anti-Black racism as a kid, and occasionally that pops up now too, but we can talk about it. And because I'm not 8 years old or something, I don't internalize it. Of course, the other thing that impacts my relationship with my mom so much is dieting. She was a chronic dieter. She learned that habit from her mother, and she enrolled me in it, as I said earlier, in a really young age. So that's another part of our journey that's been very, very complicated and has a racial aspect of it too, So yeah, I don't know if you want me to get into that.
Well, let's, no, I was looking for this quote, which of course I can't find now when I want it, but there's so much I want to talk to you about. Well, here, I'll just read this passage that you wrote. I think that was in the same essay that we were talking about, but you said, it's hard to describe how the particular resignation of American Blackness sometimes feels. It swallows sound. It's an impassive reflection in the mirror, so massive you must look away. It feels like stopping time and disappearing, sliding through that tiny rip you used to press your eye to years ago when you were little, but what you saw made no sense. Candle-lit ships bobbing on still Atlantic waters, the hedge of the new world green at the horizon, the smell of sex and menstrual fluid and pus from somewhere. And is that the sound of a violin? Oh my gosh. You're like an amazing, right? That's like amazing writer. But anyway, when you talk also, and I don't want to only talk about race because I do want to go back to your body, which personally I'm like super interested in, but I'm interested in all of it. But the moment on the swing set where you were pushing the child, the moment on the swing set when somebody assumed you lived in like this bad part of Marin County, and you had this whole internal dialogue with the woman, like where you said all the things like, why did you assume that just because of how I look, I lived in that particular neighborhood? Like, don't you realize that's racist? And all these like small slights along these little things that just keep like jabbing away at you. How do you resolve that and just sort of like move on? How do you like be like, okay, like I'm not going to yell at this woman. I'm going to just like, tell me about that.
Well, yeah, I do remember that moment, and I still think about it, even though I wrote about it, which is a form of processing, but I still think about that moment a lot. And, I had this internal reaction of kind of the, pot boiling over, but externally, I was very calm and polite to her and just corrected her, her wrong assumption about where I was from, but in a very polite, friendly way. So, which is to say I shoved down what I actually felt and stifled it, which, if you do that, you either have to process it at some point or, it goes rancid inside you. You put things in the disappear box, they don't actually disappear. They just get moldy, So Zibby, your question of like, how do you process the 1,000 slights? That's the $1 million question, like I think about it racially because that's where that is where I sense them. And that is the way that they harm me most. But like, any woman has had to sort of just politely respond to a dude who said something or did something, because she doesn't want to risk seeming, like she's out of control, or she just wants to like get along, or, whatever. Like, this is something that anyone who has a marginalized part of their identity relates to. I think for me, getting to write about it helps me externalize it, like, because in the moment you do so often have to just kind of take a breath and like put it aside and decide you're not going to let it derail your day. And like, it's them, not you, all of that. But that pile of stuff, like it grows, inside of us. And so I think for me, the straightest route to kind of letting it go is probably writing about it for me, because that's how I understand the world, But if I could answer that question with like a 1, 2, 3 step, thing, I could retire tomorrow. I wish that I knew how to not feel rocked by those moments, because they're part of life, and, they're not going away, even as the world improves in many ways. Like, those little moments, I don't think are going away, not in my lifetime anyway.
And let's go back to the body talk, if you don't mind.
Okay.
And actually, when I was reading this, I made a mental note. I was like, I need to like go and see if she had posted any pictures of what she used to look like, because you make all these references, and I didn't even go back and check. But I'm wondering if, because I'm like, what is it like to have such, like sometimes I post pictures of like a much smaller version of myself, and I'm like, my before is now like what I would love to get to in my life. You know what I mean? So
it's funny how that works. Yeah. I mean, I've had all kinds of bodies in terms of body size. I've been sort of like what you would consider in New York City, let's say, to just be like a standard thin, I've been painfully thin when I was really deep in subclinical eating disorder behavior and overexercise. I've been what you would call just like a little bit plus size. I've been really fat. I've been all over more than once.
And where do you feel the best? Like, how did you decide to stop dieting 5 years ago? What does that mean? And like, where is your happy place?
Yeah. Well, where I feel the best doesn't actually have much to do with the size and shape of my body. I mean, that's one thing, because I was never thin enough. When I was thin, my boobs weren't perky enough. Like, it's always something. Like, the goal line is always moving. And so I feel the best right now. I'm probably the fattest that I have been, I don't know, that I'm aware of, just going by like dress size, although I don't weigh myself anymore, so I can't say for sure, but just going by dress size. But I feel the best I have ever felt, because I am not engaged in the project of perpetually renovating my body, not really treating my body as a place that I was allowed to just linger in and enjoy and savor, but treating my body as a problem, as a mistake, as something that was just constantly out of control and I had to wrangle, as something that scared me, as something that felt out of control. I mean, that's how I always felt about my body, regardless of how it looked. Yeah. Because dieting is not really about how you look, to my way of thinking. Dieting is essentially a political sedative, I think. There's a quote that I love from Naomi Wolf, where she says, "A culture obsessed with female thinness is not obsessed with female beauty. It's obsessed with female obedience." Mm. And that captures quite a bit of how I feel. There's another quote by a scholar, Gilman Sander. I'm probably going to mess it up, but the gist of it is that dieting is a way that women show that they understand their role in society. Mm. It's a way that they perform their gender. And, as I became more politically aware of kind of the underbelly of diet culture, because it's not natural or organic. There have been periods of time, and there are places on the planet and cultures now that prize fat women, right? Like, it's not some natural law that women are supposed to be thin in order to be attractive. It's a cultural construct, that kind of masquerades as something neutral. As I became more aware of the politics of dieting and the ways in this country that, fear of fatness and the desire for thinness is very literally tied to anti-Black racism and chattel slavery. And you can see it in like women's magazines and entertainment, from the antebellum era. As I became more aware of that, it fueled me to stop doing this to myself. And, I only speak for myself. People are on their own journey, and people can disagree with me. But for me, there's no question that the creative and spiritual and political freedom that I feel no longer dieting is worth more than I could ever possibly say. And I would never, ever, ever go back, no matter, what someone said my body would look like. Yeah. Plus there's the fact that diets don't work for like most people, so it's sort of like a cure that doesn't work for a problem that doesn't exist, I guess is how I think of it in a nutshell.
Awesome.
Or several
tagline for dieting.
Yeah. Exactly.
So what is coming next for you? You have this book out. Has it changed your life? What do you want to do next? Like, what are you excited about?
I want to write another book next. This was truly a dream come true. This was like a childhood dream come true. And I will be writing until the day I die. Whether or not anybody reads it is a different question. And whether or not anybody publishes it is another question. But I'm thinking about what my next book will be about. And I am, in conversation with a couple different sort of writerly platforms about writing more regularly for them. And I'm really hoping that I get to, I'm a lawyer and I work at a law school. And so that's kind of the other hat I wear, but I'm hoping that I can find ways to focus more on writing because it really, it's my place of joy, even though it's sometimes, as really difficult and vexing and it's a lot of work. It's the place where I feel kind of most alive and like I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing on the planet. So yeah, that's my goal, to have more time and space to write. That's what I want.
That does sound nice.
Doesn't that sound nice?
That sounds really nice.
Just wave a magic wand.
Sign me up.
Exactly.
What advice would you have for aspiring authors?
Oh my advice for aspiring authors would be, I can't take credit for this advice because it's advice that was, has been given to me and that I rely on, to focus on habit more than inspiration, because inspiration is fickle and it like comes in and out with the tide and you can't rely on it. And habit is just much more of a workhorse, I think. There's a quote from Madeleine L'Engle who said, inspiration usually comes during work, not before it.
That's great.
And I love that.
I love that.
Right?
I love that. Yep.
Don't wait around for inspiration. Just keep chipping away because, as you know from writing, like you can't get to the good draft unless you go through the bad drafts. So if you're unwilling to go through the bad drafts, or you're unwilling to work when you're not inspired, then you literally can't get to the good stuff. You sort of have to walk through that hallway to get to the door at the end of it. So that's my one little bit of advice is go for habit, not inspiration.
I love that. And just one question, because I'm curious, the guys who you mentioned, particularly the one who like leaned over you at like a table, do they know about this book? Do they remember those moments? Like, have you heard from any of them?
Oh, Zibby. So yeah, there's an essay in the book called On Dating White Guys While Me, where I write about my, former, but very strong desire to be chosen by a white guy as a romantic partner because of the power of their approval in the culture, and I do go through a number of guys that I had these, I don't even know what I would call them. I don't know, like an asexual romance. I don't know, like not a normal friendship, but not a full-blown romance either. And Let's see. There is one of them knows for sure, but he hasn't gotten back to me about it.
Oh dear.
Another one, his best friend told me like, hey, I saw your book in a bookstore. And I suppose that means that, his best friend, who's the guy I write about, knows. But yeah, I mean, I have no idea. It's out in the world. Maybe they come across it. And if they remember things differently, that's okay. That's the nature of life. In a way, the essay is less about their behavior, although I do think it was often strange, and more about my process, trying to get over this very strange habit that I was in with these guys. But yeah, the guy who leaned over me, like, I don't know. I still don't know what to make of that.
Right? I know. I was reading along with you. I'm like, what was he doing? Whatever.
Yeah,
but
we'll never know.
I loved reading about it.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
The crazy little moments in life where you're like, what? Anyway.
I know. We'll never know.
Never know. Well, Savala, thank you so much. This has been so fun. The time went by in like 2 seconds. And again, thank you for these beautiful essays. I really admire your writing and the way you look at the world. And it's really cool. Great job.
Thank you, Zibby. I so appreciate the chance to chat with you. And I just love your book world, your world of books, and I'm really thrilled to be a part of it. So thank you so much.
Awesome. All right. Well, take care, and I hope to talk to you soon. Thanks for listening to this episode of Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram at Zibby Owens and at Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. Also sign up for my newsletter at zibbyowens.com and sign up for my virtual book club and meet lots of authors on Zoom every other week. Thanks so much to Steve and Ryan at Texture Sound for the sound editing. And thank you to Morning Moon Productions for providing this fantastic intro and outro music.